Look at your reflection. There, staring back at you, is something so common yet so mysterious that even after centuries of scientific inquiry, we still cannot fully explain it. Your eyes, windows to your soul, as poets claim, but more scientifically, windows to your genetic ancestry, carrying stories thousands of years old. Imagine standing in a crowded room, scanning faces. Brown eyes, blue eyes, green, hazel, amber, gray, each pair unique, yet following patterns so precise that scientists can sometimes predict a child's eye color with mathematical formulas. But here is the paradox. Despite mapping the human genome and understanding genetic inheritance better than ever before, the complete story of how we get our eye colors remains partially hidden in shadow. Why can two blue-eyed parents occasionally have a brown-eyed child? Something genetic textbooks once declared impossible. Why did blue eyes suddenly appear in human populations roughly 6,000 to 10,000 years ago, spreading rapidly across Europe when brown was the original human default? And perhaps most perplexing, why would evolution favor something as seemingly trivial as eye color variation at all? The answers lie at the intersection of genetics, anthropology, climate science, and human migration. A scientific detective story spanning continents and millennia. To understand the mystery of human eye color, we must first understand what we are actually seeing when we look into someone's eyes. The visible part, the iris, contains specialized cells called melanocytes that produce melanin, the same pigment responsible for skin and hair color. These cells can produce two types of melanin: eumelanin, brown-black, and pheomelanin, red-yellow. The remarkable array of human eye colors, from the deepest brown to the palest blue, results not from different pigments but from varying amounts of melanin and how it scatters light within the iris's structure. Brown eyes contain abundant melanin in both the front and back layers of the iris. Blue eyes have minimal melanin, allowing light to scatter through the translucent layers and reflect back as blue, the same physical phenomenon that makes the sky appear blue. Dr. William Goodwin, genetic anthropologist at the University of Cambridge, explains, eye color is not actually a pigment. Blue eyes don't contain blue pigment. They appear blue for the same reason the sky appears blue, Rayleigh scattering of light. This understanding is relatively recent. For centuries, scientists struggled to explain eye color inheritance, creating increasingly complex models that inevitably failed to account for all observed patterns. The first significant breakthrough came in 1907, when Charles and Gertrude Davenport proposed that eye color followed a simple Mendelian inheritance pattern, with brown being dominant over blue. For decades, this model was taught as fact in biology classrooms worldwide. But by the 1980s, the Davenport model was crumbling. Too many blue-eyed children were being born to brown-eyed parents, and occasionally, though rarely, brown-eyed children appeared from blue-eyed parents. Something was missing from the equation. In 2007, researchers at the University of Copenhagen made a landmark discovery. Studying the DNA of people with different eye colors, they identified a single gene called OCA2 that seemed to play a major role. A small mutation in a neighboring gene called HERC2 acted as a switch, turning down melanin production in the iris and creating blue eyes. We were able to show that all blue-eyed individuals have exactly the same switch at exactly the same spot in their DNA, said Dr. Hans Eiberg, who led the study. This discovery led to an even more startling conclusion. Every blue-eyed person on Earth today shares a common ancestor who lived approximately 6,000 to 10,000 years ago. Blue eyes, in evolutionary terms, are brand new. But if brown eyes were the human default for hundreds of thousands of years, why would blue eyes suddenly appear and spread so rapidly? What evolutionary advantage could possibly come from having less melanin in your iris? And this is where our mystery deepens, because the answer challenges our fundamental understanding of how evolution shapes human traits. When most people think of evolution, they imagine traits being selected because they provide a survival advantage: sharper teeth, stronger muscles, greater intelligence. But eye color seems trivial by comparison. How could having blue versus brown eyes possibly influence survival? That is precisely what makes eye color so fascinating, says Dr. Meredith Randall, evolutionary biologist specializing in human phenotypes. It forces us to consider evolutionary mechanisms beyond simple survival advantages. One hypothesis centers on sexual selection, the idea that certain traits evolve because they help attract mates rather than directly aiding survival. In regions with historically low population density, like prehistoric Northern Europe, distinctive traits might help potential partners stand out. Blue eyes, being rare and noticeable, could have been perceived as attractive or exotic, giving their bearers a reproductive advantage. This explanation seems plausible, but it raises another question. Why would blue eyes be considered more attractive than brown in certain populations? Some researchers believe the answer lies in vitamin D. Northern European populations receive less sunlight than populations closer to the equator. Since human bodies produce vitamin D when skin is exposed to sunlight, northern populations faced a greater risk of deficiency. Lighter skin evolved in these regions to allow more efficient vitamin D production with limited sun exposure. There appears to be a genetic linkage between genes controlling eye color and those influencing skin pigmentation, explains Dr. Goodwin. The same mutation that reduces melanin in the iris often reduces it in the skin as well. This genetic linkage hypothesis suggests blue eyes might have spread not because they themselves provided an advantage, but because they were genetically hitchhiking alongside traits that did, namely lighter skin in northern climates. But the vitamin D hypothesis has weaknesses. For one, eye color does not significantly affect vitamin D production. And more puzzling still, not all northern populations developed blue eyes at the same rate or to the same extent. Looking more closely at the genetic evidence reveals something unexpected. The mutations associated with blue eyes appear to have spread faster than would be expected from natural selection alone, a phenomenon geneticists call a selective sweep. In 2012, researchers at Stanford University compared the DNA of ancient human remains with modern populations. Their findings suggested the spread of blue eyes coincided with a major migration of agricultural peoples from the Near East into Europe approximately 6,000 to 8,000 years ago. These early farmers gradually displaced or interbred with the hunter-gatherer populations of Europe, potentially introducing the blue eye mutation. But here the timeline creates a problem. The genetic mutation for blue eyes appears to have originated around 10,000 years ago, while the farming migration began later. Additionally, genetic evidence increasingly suggests the blue eye mutation first appeared in the hunter-gatherer populations of Europe, not the incoming farmers. We are looking at a complex interplay of factors, says anthropologist Dr. Randall. Natural selection, sexual selection, genetic drift, and migration patterns all potentially influencing the distribution of eye colors we see today. The plot thickens when we consider green eyes, the rarest of all eye colors globally, making up only 2% of the world's population. Green eyes result from a moderate amount of melanin combined with a particular structure of the iris that causes light to reflect back with a greenish appearance. The genetics of green eyes are even more complex than those of blue eyes, involving multiple genes interacting in ways we still do not fully understand. Amber and hazel eyes add additional complexity. These intermediate eye colors involve varying amounts of both types of melanin distributed differently across the iris. Some researchers believe these variations represent evolutionary experiments, nature testing different phenotypes against changing environmental conditions. A study published in 2019 in the journal Nature Genetics identified 50 different genes that influence eye color. The researchers analyzed genetic data from nearly 195,000 individuals of European ancestry and found dozens of genetic variants associated with eye color. This discovery shattered the old idea that eye color inheritance could be explained by simple Mendelian genetics. We now know eye color is incredibly complex, says geneticist Dr. Goodwin. It involves multiple genes interacting in ways we're still working to understand. The old textbook model of dominant and recessive alleles is simply inadequate. This genetic complexity may explain why eye color prediction remains imperfect, even with advanced genetic testing. It also raises profound questions about why such a complex system evolved for a trait with no obvious survival benefit. One intriguing hypothesis concerns climate adaptation beyond just vitamin D production. Eyes with less melanin, blue, green, gray, may be more sensitive to light, potentially providing an advantage in the low-light conditions of northern winters. Conversely, darker eyes may better protect against the intense sunlight of equatorial regions. Dr. Randall explains, melanin absorbs light, More melanin means less light reaching the retina. In very bright environments, this could protect against sun damage and reduce glare. In darker environments, less melanin allows more light in, potentially improving vision in low-light conditions. This light sensitivity hypothesis gained support from a 2014 study that found individuals with lighter eye colors performed better on certain visual tasks in low-light conditions, while those with darker eyes showed advantages in bright light. But even this explanation has flaws. The differences in visual performance were subtle, hardly enough to drive strong evolutionary pressure. And many northern populations retained predominantly brown eyes despite living in low-light environments for thousands of years. The mystery deepens further when we consider gray eyes, which appear similar to blue but result from a different arrangement of melanin and iris structure. Gray eyes are particularly common in Eastern European and Baltic populations, suggesting they may have emerged and spread through different evolutionary pathways than blue eyes. We may be overlooking something fundamental, suggests Dr. Goodwin. Perhaps eye color variation itself, independent of the specific colors, provided some advantage in certain environments or social structures. This idea that diversity itself might be adaptive leads us to an emerging field called frequency-dependent selection. In this evolutionary model, rare traits can be advantageous simply because they are unusual, creating a balanced polymorphism where multiple variants persist in a population. Consider this scenario. In a world where everyone has brown eyes, the first blue-eyed individuals would be distinctive and memorable, potentially leading to social or mating advantages simply through novelty. As blue eyes become more common, this advantage diminishes, creating a natural balance point where multiple eye colors coexist in the population. But this explanation still feels incomplete. If novelty alone drove eye color diversity, we would expect to see similar patterns of eye color variation across all human populations. Instead, we see dramatically different distributions around the world, with some populations showing remarkable eye color diversity and others remaining almost exclusively brown-eyed. To understand this geographic variation, researchers have turned to an unlikely source: parasites. In the forests of Finland, in 2006, a research team led by parasitologist Dr. Jukka Peltonen made an observation that would transform our understanding of eye color evolution. They were studying a parasitic infection common in northern wildlife and noticed something strange. The parasite seemed to affect animals differently depending on their eye color. This observation led to a groundbreaking hypothesis now gaining significant scientific support. Eye color diversity may have evolved partially as protection against pathogens through a mechanism called apostatic selection. The theory works like this: many parasites and pathogens evolve to target specific genetic profiles in their hosts. If a population is genetically uniform, a pathogen can more easily adapt to infect the entire group. But genetic diversity creates moving targets, making it harder for pathogens to adapt to the entire population at once. Think of it as evolutionary encryption, explains Dr. Randall. Diversity in visible traits like eye color often reflects deeper genetic diversity in immune system functions. Populations with more phenotypic diversity may have better collective resistance to pathogens. This pathogen resistance hypothesis gained substantial support in 2013 when researchers at the University of Oxford discovered that genes associated with eye color are often in close proximity to genes controlling immune responses on chromosome 15. We found significant linkage disequilibrium between OCA2/HERC2 variants and several immune system genes, the study's lead author reported. This suggests selection pressure on one may have influenced the other. Further evidence came from population studies showing correlations between eye color diversity and historical pathogen prevalence. Regions with historically high pathogen loads often developed greater eye color polymorphism, not because eye color itself affected disease resistance, but because the genetic diversity it represented provided broader population-level protection. This revelation transforms our understanding of eye color evolution. Rather than thinking of specific colors as advantageous, we should consider diversity itself as the adaptive trait. Blue eyes weren't necessarily better than brown in any absolute sense. They were simply different, and that difference itself provided protection at the population level. But this raises another question. If genetic diversity is so beneficial, why didn't all human populations develop similar eye color diversity? The answer appears to involve population size, migration patterns, and the founder effect. When small groups of humans migrated to new territories, they carried only a subset of the genetic diversity from their original population. If the founders happened to carry the mutations for blue or green eyes, those traits could become more common in the new population through genetic drift, random changes in gene frequency that occur in small populations. This explains why certain isolated populations show unusual patterns of eye color distribution. For example, a village in northern China called Liqian has an unusually high percentage of green-eyed residents, theorized to be descendants of lost Roman legionnaires who settled in the region around 53 BCE after the Battle of Kari. Similarly, the Burusho people of Pakistan have a high incidence of light-colored eyes, possibly linked to ancient Greek influence during Alexander the Great's campaigns in the region. These population islands of unexpected eye color distributions support the founder effect explanation. But founder effects alone cannot explain the broader continental patterns we observe. Why did blue eyes become so common in Northern Europe specifically, while remaining rare elsewhere? In 2014, researchers at the University of Wisconsin proposed the perfect storm hypothesis. Blue eyes spread rapidly in Northern Europe because multiple selection pressures converged in that specific geographic region. First, the founder effect established the mutation in the population. Then, sexual selection may have favored the novel trait. Simultaneously, the genetic linkage with lighter skin provided advantages for vitamin D production. And finally, the pathogen resistance benefit of genetic diversity reinforced the trait's persistence in the population. It wasn't any single factor, explains Dr. Goodwin. It was the unique combination of multiple evolutionary pressures occurring in the specific environmental and social context of prehistoric Northern Europe. This multi-factor explanation finally accounts for the puzzling distribution of eye colors we see globally. It explains why blue eyes became common in Northern Europe but not in equally northern regions of Asia, where different founding populations and cultural factors created different evolutionary trajectories. The perfect storm hypothesis also helps explain the varying speeds at which blue eyes spread through different populations. In regions where multiple selection pressures aligned, the trait spread rapidly. In areas where fewer factors favored it, the spread was slower or never occurred at all. This understanding revolutionizes how we think about human trait evolution. Rather than simple adaptations to environment, many human traits, including eye color, represent complex interactions between biology, geography, cultural practices, and chance historical events. But our scientific detective story does not end here. Because just as we begin to understand the evolutionary history of eye colors, we discover that eye colors themselves are not as fixed as we once believed. Approximately 10 to 15% of Caucasian babies are born with blue eyes that later darken to green, hazel, or brown. This occurs because melanin production in the iris continues during early childhood, only reaching its final level around age 3. More surprisingly, some adults report their eye color changing slightly throughout their lives, becoming lighter or darker, or developing new patterns in the iris. While dramatic changes usually indicate medical conditions requiring attention, subtle changes appear to be relatively common. The iris is living tissue, explains ophthalmologist Dr. Sarah Winters. It responds to environmental factors, aging processes, and hormonal changes throughout life. This dynamic nature of eye color adds yet another layer to our mystery. Eye color is not simply a static trait determined at birth, but a somewhat fluid characteristic that can evolve throughout an individual's lifetime. The evolving science of eye color has profound implications beyond evolutionary biology. It touches fields as diverse as forensic science, personalized medicine, and our understanding of human migration patterns. In forensic science, eye color prediction from DNA evidence has become increasingly sophisticated. The H-IRIS-Plex system, developed in 2012, can predict eye color from DNA samples with approximately 90% accuracy for blue and brown eyes, though prediction remains less reliable for intermediate colors like green and hazel. We can now look at a DNA sample from a crime scene and say with high confidence whether it came from someone with blue or brown eyes, explains forensic geneticist Dr. Martin Walsh. This narrows suspect pools in cases with no eyewitnesses. This technology has already helped solve cold cases where traditional investigation methods failed. In 2015, Dutch authorities used DNA phenotyping to create a physical profile of a suspect in an unsolved murder case from 1999, leading to an arrest and conviction. Beyond forensics, eye color genetics is opening new frontiers in personalized medicine. Research has revealed surprising correlations between eye color and susceptibility to certain medical conditions. People with lighter eyes appear to have higher risk of age-related macular degeneration, while darker-eyed individuals show increased risk for certain types of cataracts. Blue-eyed people demonstrate higher pain tolerance for specific types of pain, according to a 2014 study at the University of Pittsburgh. Most intriguingly, eye color correlates with certain behavioral tendencies. Multiple studies have found that people with darker eyes typically demonstrate faster reaction times, while those with lighter eyes often perform better on tasks requiring strategic thinking and planning. These correlations likely reflect the pleiotropic effects of genes, single genes affecting multiple seemingly unrelated traits, explains Dr. Randall. The genes influencing melanin production in the iris also affect neurological development and function. These discoveries underscore how interconnected human traits truly are. A genetic mutation that changes eye color might simultaneously influence dozens of other traits in ways we are only beginning to understand. In the field of population genetics, eye color markers have become valuable tools for tracing ancient migration patterns. By mapping the distribution of specific genetic variants associated with eye color, researchers can track how human populations moved and mixed throughout history. One fascinating application involves tracing the lost tribes of Israel. By examining eye color inheritance patterns in populations claiming descent from ancient Israelites, researchers have found genetic signatures supporting some traditional claims of ancestry while challenging others. Similarly, studies of eye color genetics in Latin American populations have helped quantify the relative genetic contributions of European colonizers, indigenous peoples, and enslaved Africans in different regions, information that helps fill gaps in historical records distorted by colonialism. Your eyes are not just windows to your soul, says Dr. Goodwin. They're windows to your ancestry, carrying genetic signatures that can be traced back thousands of years. This ancestral connection explains why eye color often evokes strong cultural associations and personal identity. Blue eyes became romanticized in European literature and art, while many African and Asian cultures traditionally celebrated the beauty of brown eyes. These cultural preferences both reflected and reinforced the geographic distribution of different eye colors. But perhaps the most profound implication of modern eye color research is how it challenges our understanding of race and human categorization. For centuries, eye color was used as a marker of racial classification, with blue eyes considered a defining feature of Nordic or Aryan identity. Nazi Germany infamously fetishized blue eyes as markers of racial purity, while persecuting those with darker features. Modern genetics has thoroughly debunked these racial classifications. We now know that human genetic variation exists on a continuum, with more variation existing within traditionally defined racial groups than between them. The genetics of eye color demonstrates the scientific bankruptcy of racial classification systems, says Dr. Randall. The same genetic variants associated with blue eyes in Europeans can be found at lower frequencies in populations around the world, including parts of Africa and Asia. This understanding comes at a crucial moment in human history. As genetic testing becomes increasingly accessible, more people are discovering unexpected ancestry in their genetic profiles, including genetic markers for eye colors that may not be expressed in their physical appearance. A person with brown eyes may carry recessive alleles for blue eyes, invisible in their own appearance but potentially expressed in their children or grandchildren. This invisible genetic heritage reminds us that human ancestry is far more complex and interconnected than surface appearances suggest. The science of eye color also offers a powerful lesson about the nature of human evolution itself. Rather than a straightforward march toward optimization, evolution often works through complex trade-offs, historical contingencies, and the interplay between multiple selection pressures. Blue eyes did not evolve because they were inherently better than brown eyes. They spread through certain populations due to a unique convergence of factors, some adaptive, some cultural, and some simply the result of historical chance. This complexity mirrors what we're learning about human evolution more broadly. Many human traits emerged not from simple adaptation to environment but from the complex interplay between biology, culture, migration, and chance historical events. Eye color may seem trivial compared to traits like intelligence or disease resistance, says Dr. Goodwin, but understanding its evolution gives us profound insights into the forces that shaped human diversity more broadly. And perhaps most remarkably, the story of eye color is still being written. New research techniques are uncovering previously unknown genetic factors influencing eye color. Population movements in our increasingly globalized world are creating new patterns of eye color distribution. And the very definition of eye color is becoming more nuanced as we develop more sophisticated measurement techniques. As the sun rises over a research facility in Helsinki, Dr. William Goodwin adjusts his microscope, examining iris tissue samples from volunteers around the world. On the wall behind him hangs a map with colored pins showing the global distribution of different eye colors, a visual representation of humanity's shared genetic heritage and distinctive evolutionary paths. What fascinates me most, he says, looking up from his work, is how something as seemingly simple as eye color opens windows into our deepest questions about human origins. Indeed, the science of eye color touches on humanity's most fundamental questions. Who are we? Where did we come from? How did we become so diverse yet remain so connected? In those questions lies the true significance of eye color research. Beyond the practical applications in medicine and forensics, beyond the evolutionary puzzles and genetic complexities, the story of human eye color reminds us of a profound truth. Diversity itself has value. The various eye colors that grace human populations emerged not because any single color was optimal, but because variation itself provided resilience. In the face of changing environments, shifting pathogen landscapes, and unpredictable future challenges, genetic diversity, visible in our eyes, helped ensure our species' survival. This insight extends far beyond biology. Cultural diversity, intellectual diversity, and diversity of perspective all provide similar resilience for human societies. Different viewpoints allow us to see challenges from multiple angles. Different cultural traditions offer varied solutions to life's problems. Different ways of thinking expand our collective problem-solving capacity. The next time you look into someone's eyes, whether brown, blue, green, gray, hazel, or amber, remember you're witnessing not just personal genetic heritage but the living result of our species' evolutionary journey. Those eyes carry genetic information passed down through countless generations, shaped by migration across continents, influenced by cultural practices, and preserved by the adaptive value of diversity itself. In every human eye color lies a reminder that our differences evolved not to separate us, but to help ensure our collective survival in an ever-changing world.